What if I told you that your go-to never-fail spring fishing spot is probably the worst place you could be casting a line right now? It sounds crazy, I know, but today we're going to tear apart the myth of the secret spring spot. We're going to look at the hard truth that most anglers don't want to admit. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why these places fail, how to spot the warning signs, and where to find the locations that actually hold fish. The reason you're not getting bites isn't your expensive new lure, and it's not your casting technique. It's a hidden trap that 90% of anglers fall into every single spring. And it all starts with a spot everyone thinks is their own little secret. Think your spot is different? Let me know in the comments right now why you think your secret spot is truly a secret. I'm really curious to see who's right by the end of this. So why does this happen? Why do we all end up fishing in the same handful of places? It's simple human nature, really, especially in the spring. As the water warms up, fish move into predictable, shallow areas. They head for the north-facing bays that get the most sun, the creek inlets bringing in warmer water, and the first major drop-offs near spawning flats. These are the classic, textbook locations. For generations, anglers have gone to these same places because, at one point, they worked incredibly well. Maybe your grandpa showed you a spot, and his grandpa showed him. There's a powerful comfort in that history. It feels safe. Going to a known spot feels like a guaranteed good time, while exploring a new area feels like a huge risk. You might not catch anything. You might waste a precious day off. So, we stick to what we know year after year, even when the results start telling us we shouldn't. Let's start at the beginning. How does a spot even become a community hole in the first place? It always starts innocently. One angler, maybe years ago, finds a great location. It could be a submerged rock pile, a perfect weed edge, or a creek mouth that just funnels in baitfish every spring. They have a fantastic day catching fish after fish. Naturally, they tell a close friend. That friend tells their friend. Or maybe someone sees them there, watches them pull in a big one from a distance. The next weekend, 2 boats are there, then 4. Before you know it, word spreads through online forums, Facebook groups, or just quiet chatter at the local bait shop. The spot gets a reputation. It becomes the place to be in April. The problem is the fish population in that one small area can't sustain that level of attention. What was once a pristine, productive spot quickly becomes a shadow of its former self, yet the legend of what it once was keeps people coming back long after the good fishing is gone. It's a cycle of its own making, fueled by past glory and the hope of reliving that one epic day. So how do you know if you've fallen into this trap? The first and most obvious sign is what I call the parking lot test. Picture this. You pull up to the boat launch or your favorite shore fishing access point an hour before sunrise. You're hoping to be the first one there, but the parking lot is already half full. You see trucks and trailers from 3 different counties. That is a massive red flag. The amount of traffic a spot gets is directly proportional to the fishing pressure it receives. If you have to fight for a parking spot at 5 in the morning on a Tuesday, you can be absolutely certain that the water is seeing dozens, if not hundreds, of lures every single day. The fish in that area are not resting. They are constantly being targeted. This isn't a secret spot anymore. It's a public park. Don't ignore this sign. It's the easiest and most reliable indicator that you are fishing a community hole. The best fishing spots often have the least convenient access, not a perfectly paved lot that can hold 50 vehicles. Think about that next time you pull in. Now let's move from the parking lot down to the water's edge. The shoreline itself tells a story if you know how to read it. For shore anglers, look at the ground. Is there a deeply worn, muddy path leading down to a specific point or clearing? Are the banks eroded and slick from constant foot traffic? That's a dead giveaway. Look at the trees and bushes around the most castable areas. Do you see the scars? I'm talking about little bits of tangled fishing line, a forgotten bobber stuck in a high branch, or nicks in the tree bark from years of errant casts and snagged lures. These are the battle scars of a heavily fished area. For boat anglers, it's a little different, but the signs are still there. Look for anchor marks on the bottom with your electronics. See if the best-looking logs or rocks have a collection of snagged jigs and lures decorating them like sad, rusty ornaments. These little details are the fingerprints left behind by an army of anglers. They prove, beyond a doubt, that you are not the only one who thinks this is a special place. You are, in fact, just the latest in a very long line. Let's dig into the science of it for a minute. Why does pressure matter so much? It's not just about the fish being caught and removed, though that's part of it. It's about constant disturbance. Think about it from the fish's perspective. Their world is supposed to be relatively quiet. Suddenly, every day, there are strange vibrations in the water. The constant thumping of trolling motors, the splash of anchors, the pinging of sonar, and the endless plop, plop, plop of lures hitting the surface. These are unnatural sounds. For a prey animal like a bass or a walleye, constant, unfamiliar noise signals danger. It puts them on high alert. Their instinct is not to eat, but to hide. They'll either hunker down and become inactive, developing what anglers call lockjaw, or they'll move out of the area entirely, seeking quieter water. Even if they don't leave, their feeding windows become incredibly short and specific, maybe just a few minutes at dawn or dusk. You could be casting the perfect lure right over their heads, but if they're stressed and on edge from the constant commotion, they simply will not bite. The environment has become too hostile for them to feed comfortably. Beyond just being stressed, the fish in these community holes become educated. This is a term we anglers use a lot, and it's very real. A fish in a remote, lightly fished lake might see a spinnerbait once in its life. It looks new, flashy, and triggers an aggressive feeding response, but a bass living on a popular point near a major boat ramp, that fish has seen it all. It has seen every color of Senko. It has seen crankbaits, jerkbaits, jigs, and drop shots. It has seen them presented fast, slow, erratically, and methodically. Many of them have probably been hooked before and survived. They learn to associate these strange, clunky objects with a painful, negative experience. They can start to recognize the specific sounds, vibrations, and silhouettes of popular lures. This is why you'll often hear old-timers say, "They're only hitting a weird color today." It's not because the fish suddenly developed a new taste. It's because they've become conditioned to avoid the standard, common presentations. They are literally trained by the hundreds of anglers before you to ignore your offering. You're not just trying to trick a fish into eating, you're trying to outsmart a survivor that has a PhD in lure avoidance. The spring season makes this whole problem 10 times worse. In the summer, fish are spread out all over the lake. They can be deep, shallow, in weeds, on rocks, suspended in open water. They have options. This disperses the fish, and it also disperses the fishing pressure. But in early spring, it's a different game. The vast majority of the lake is still too cold. The fish are concentrated in a few predictable areas where the water is a few degrees warmer, and the conditions are right for their pre-spawn behavior. This could be a tiny fraction of the lake's total area, maybe just 5 or 10% of it. So what happens? You have 100% of the anglers all excited to get out after a long winter, converging on that tiny 5 or 10% of the water where the fish are. It's a perfect storm of concentrated fish and concentrated pressure. The very thing that makes the fish predictable and easy to locate also makes them incredibly vulnerable to being overfished and pressured into oblivion. That's why your can't miss spring spot feels so crowded. It's because it's one of the few places the fish are, and every single angler with a map knows it. Another psychological trap we fall into is what I call the false positive or confirmation bias. Let's say you go to your spot 5 times in the spring. 4 of those times you catch nothing. It's slow, it's frustrating, but on that 5th trip, conditions are perfect. The weather is stable, the barometric pressure is just right, and you manage to catch 1 or 2 decent fish. What does your brain remember most vividly? It's not the 4 boring fishless trips, it's the 1 successful trip. That 1 good day confirms your belief that this is a good spot. You conveniently forget the failures and focus on the success. This reinforces the habit of returning. You tell yourself, the fish are here, I just need to be here on the right day. While that might be true to an extent, it's a misleading way to think. A truly great spot produces consistently under a variety of conditions. It doesn't require a perfect alignment of the stars to give up one or two fish. If you're only having success 10 or 20% of the time, that's not a secret honey hole. That's just a gamble. You're playing the lottery instead of strategically fishing. Okay, so we've spent a lot of time talking about the problem. Your secret spot is crowded, the fish are stressed and educated, and you're caught in a cycle of false hope. It sounds pretty bleak, I know. But here is the good news. For every one of these community holes, there are dozens of incredible untouched spots on the same body of water that almost nobody fishes. The rest of this video is not about complaining. It's about breaking the cycle. It's about giving you a new playbook. We're going to shift from identifying the problem to finding the solution. This is where you separate yourself from the 90% of anglers who are stuck in the past. It requires a change in mindset. You have to be willing to trade the comfort of the familiar for the potential of the unknown. You have to become an explorer, not just a visitor. The first step is admitting that your old spot is compromised. The next step is to start looking at the lake not as a collection of famous spots, but as a blank canvas full of possibilities that everyone else is ignoring. Let's get started. Your single most powerful tool in this new mission is not a fancy fish finder or a new rod, it's a map. And I don't mean just glancing at the GPS on your boat, I mean dedicated map study. Before you even think about hooking up the trailer, spend an hour with a good hydrographic map of the lake. You can use paper maps or apps like Navionics or Fishidy. Don't just look for the most obvious classic structures like a giant main lake point that screams fish here. Everyone sees that. Instead, start looking for the subtle, weird, and overlooked features. Look for a small secondary point inside a bay that everyone drives past to get to the main point. Look for a small depression or trench on a large, seemingly boring flat. Look for an isolated rock pile in the middle of nowhere that isn't marked on older maps. These are the places that don't jump out at you. They require a bit of digging to find. Mark 10 of these maybe spots on your map. These are your targets for your next trip. Your goal is no longer to go back to Old Faithful. It's to investigate these new, overlooked possibilities. Let's expand on that idea of B-list spots. Think of the lake's structure in terms of A-list and B-list. The A-list spots are the movie stars. They are the big, obvious, famous locations that everyone knows. The giant sunken island, the sharpest drop-off, the mouth of the biggest creek. These are the spots that get all the attention and all the pressure. The B-list spots are the character actors. They're less flashy, but they are often where the real magic happens. A B-list spot might be a small 20-foot stretch of sunken logs on an otherwise plain shoreline. It could be a single, large boulder on a sand flat. It could be a slightly harder bottom composition area in a muddy bay. These are the places that the average angler running and gunning from one A-list spot to the next will drive right over without a second thought. But these small, isolated pieces of cover can hold one or two big, unpressured fish. The key is to train your eyes and your electronics to find them. Stop looking for the mountain and start looking for the small hill next to it that everyone ignores. One of the most effective strategies you can adopt is also one of the simplest. Observe what everyone else is doing and then do something different. When you get to the lake, take a minute, look around. Where are all the boats headed? You'll likely see a parade of them making a beeline for the same one or two community holes. That's your cue to turn your boat in the opposite direction. If everyone is fishing the deep weed edge, maybe you should explore the super shallow water right up against the cattails that they're ignoring. If every boat is throwing a noisy crankbait, maybe you should try a silent, slow-moving, soft plastic. This contrarian approach works because 90% of anglers are creatures of habit. They do what they've always done, and they follow the crowd. By simply choosing to fish a different area or a different type of structure or a different depth than the majority, you dramatically increase your odds of presenting a lure to fish that haven't seen one in hours or even days. Zig when everyone else zags. It's a simple rule, but it is incredibly powerful on a busy weekend. Let me give you a real-life example of how this works. A few years ago, I was fishing a popular lake in the spring. As expected, there were about 15 boats all crowded around a well-known spawning bay on the north side. I had fished it before and knew it was a tough bite. So I pulled up my map, I looked at the complete opposite side of the lake, the south side, which gets less sun and is generally colder. Most people ignore it in the spring, but I noticed a small, man-made canal that had been dug for a housing development. It was narrow and protected from the wind. My theory was that this shallow, muddy-bottomed canal might warm up faster than the surrounding south side water, creating a little microclimate. It wasn't a spot on any map. It was just a weird feature. I went over there. There wasn't another boat in sight. The water was a full 3 degrees warmer than the main lake. And it was loaded with big, pre-spawn bass that had pulled in to soak up that warmth. It was one of the best fishing days I've ever had, all because I chose to investigate a weird spot instead of joining the crowd. There's a well-known concept in business called the 80-20 rule. In fishing, I believe it's even more skewed. I call it the 90-10 rule. I am convinced that 90% of the fishing pressure on any given day is concentrated on just 10% of the lake's water. Think about that. It means that the other 90% of the lake is getting virtually no pressure at all. Your job as a thinking angler is to spend all your time exploring that forgotten 90%. This is a massive paradigm shift. It means you stop thinking of the lake as just a handful of spots connected by water. Instead, you see all that in-between water as the primary opportunity. The vast, seemingly featureless flats, the long, boring stretches of shoreline, the open water basins. These are your new hunting grounds. The fish are not just at the famous spots, they live everywhere. By committing to fishing the empty 90%, you are playing a different game than everyone else, a game with much, much better odds. To fish that other 90%, you have to redefine what structure means to you. For most anglers, structure is something big and obvious, a point, a hump, a drop-off, a visible laydown. But for a fish, structure can be much more subtle. It's anything that is different from the surrounding environment. It could be a 1-foot change in depth on a massive flat. It could be a small patch of gravel on an otherwise sandy bottom. It could be a shadow line created by a steep bank in the afternoon sun. It could even be a mud line where a recent rain has washed dirty water into the lake, creating a distinct edge against the clear water. These are the kinds of subtle structure that hold unpressured fish. You need to use your electronics, your eyes, and your brain to find them. When you're scanning a boring bank with your sonar, don't look for a giant brush pile. Look for one single dot that looks slightly harder than the mud around it. That one little difference is often all it takes to hold a big fish that no one else has ever cast to. Weather is another huge factor that can help you break away from the crowds. Most anglers have a fixed game plan. They're going to go to spot A, then spot B, regardless of the conditions. But smart anglers let the weather dictate their location. Let's take wind, for example. A strong wind is often seen as a nuisance, but it's also a massive opportunity. A wind-swept bank, especially one that the wind has been blowing into for a day or two, will have warmer surface water pushed up against it. The wind also churns up the water, activating baitfish and creating a current. The breaking waves reduce light penetration, making the fish less spooky. While everyone else is hiding in the calm, protected coves and fishing the same pressured water, the savvy angler is out on the windy point, fishing for active, aggressive fish in a spot that is probably empty of other boats. The same goes for rain, cloud cover, or a sudden cold front. Each condition makes certain parts of the lake better and certain parts worse. Learn to adapt to the weather instead of just enduring it, and it will lead you to unpressured fish. Let's talk about gear for a second. Sometimes the reason people don't fish the overlooked spots is simply because they aren't equipped for it. The community holes are often easy to fish. They're open, relatively snag-free areas, but the best, untouched spots are often the opposite, as they are the thickest, gnarliest, most intimidating cover you can find. That super thick patch of lily pads that everyone avoids. It's probably full of unpressured base. That jungle of fallen trees in the back of a creek, a potential gold mine. To fish these places effectively, you can't be using light line and small exposed hooks. You need the right gear. This means heavy braided line, a stout rod, and a collection of weedless lures like hollow body frogs, Texas-rigged plastics, and heavy jigs designed to punch through thick cover. If your equipment limits you to only fishing the easy open water spots, you are voluntarily limiting yourself to fishing the same water as everyone else. Gearing up to tackle the nasty stuff is like buying a key to a locked door that no one else can open. We've talked about maps, strategy, and gear, but the biggest hurdle is often the one between your ears. It's the mental game. Exploring new water is intimidating. There is a very real fear of failure, the fear of spending a whole day on the water and not getting a single bite. A skunked day. This fear is what keeps most anglers chained to their old, unproductive community holes. At least there, they feel like they might get a bite. You have to consciously overcome this. You have to change your definition of a successful day. For a while, success can't be measured by the number of fish in the boat. Success has to be defined as finding 3 new, promising-looking spots that you can come back to later. Success is learning a new stretch of the lake. You have to adopt an explorer's mindset and accept that some days will be about gathering information, not catching fish. Once you make that mental shift, the fear of striking out loses its power. Every trip becomes a learning experience, and eventually that learning will lead you to spots that are all your own. Let's imagine a tale of 2 anglers. Angler A is a creature of habit. He gets to the lake, heads straight for the old mill point, because he caught a big one there 5 years ago. He sees 5 other boats already there, but he squeezes in. He spends 4 hours circling the point, throwing the same 3 lures everyone else is throwing. He gets one small bite that he misses. Frustrated, he packs it in and calls it a tough day. Angler B arrives at the same time. He sees the crowd at the point and immediately turns away. He spends his first hour exploring a shallow, weedy bay that everyone ignores. Nothing. Then he spends the next 2 hours using his side imaging to scan a long, boring shoreline. He finds a single, isolated log in 12 feet of water. He marks it. On his 3rd cast to the log, he catches a 4-pound bass. He makes a few more casts, then leaves the spot alone to rest it. He spends the rest of his day looking for more spots just like that one. Who had the better day? Angler A reinforced a bad habit. Angler B not only caught a great fish, but he also found a new, high-potential spot for the future. He is building a collection of his own secret spots, not borrowing someone else's. Now, am I saying that you should never ever fish a community hole again? Not necessarily. But you have to be extremely strategic about it. The key is timing. These spots get hammered from sunup to sundown, especially on the weekends. But what about at other times? Could you fish it on a Wednesday afternoon when most people are at work? Could you try it at 10 o'clock at night for nocturnal walleye? Could you be the first one there on a cold, rainy Monday morning that scares off the fair-weather fishermen? By fishing these popular spots during off-peak hours, you can sometimes find a window of opportunity when the fish have had a chance to rest and might be more willing to feed. The pressure is a huge factor, but it's not a 24/7 constant. Think of it like a busy restaurant. You don't want to go at 7 p.m. on a Saturday, but if you go at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday, you might have the place to yourself. The same logic applies to fishing spots. If you must fish the crowd, don't go when the crowd is there. It's your only real advantage in a place that has no secrets left. So let's tie this all together into a new checklist. The next time you're planning a trip, here's your new process. First, pull up a map and identify at least 5 B-list or weird-looking spots that are not obvious community holes. Second, when you get to the lake, perform the parking lot test and observe where the other boats are going. Commit to avoiding those areas. Third, When you start fishing, focus on finding subtle differences, not giant, obvious structures. Use your electronics and your eyes. Fourth, be adaptable to the weather. Let the wind or sun guide you to where the active fish might be. And finally, change your definition of success. A day spent finding 2 new spots and getting 0 bites is more valuable in the long run than a day spent at a community hole catching 1 accidental fish. This is the blueprint. This is how you leave the 90% behind and start fishing for a class of fish that the average angler doesn't even know exists. It's more work, yes, but the rewards are infinitely greater. Your days of fishing in a crowd are over if you want them to be. So there you have it. We've established that your comfortable, reliable secret spot is often a crowded, unproductive trap. It's not the spot's fault, it's a victim of its own success, receiving pressure from dozens, maybe hundreds, of other anglers who all think it's their secret too. But the real turning point, the big aha moment in all of this, isn't just about discovering a new lure or technique. It's the realization that you need to be discovering new water. The biggest secret in fishing isn't a location on a map, it's the mindset. It's the willingness to ignore the crowd, to embrace the unknown, and to become an explorer of your local water. This shift will not only get you more and bigger bites, but it will make you a fundamentally better, more complete angler. You'll start reading the water and the conditions, not just blindly following a GPS waypoint someone shared online. Thank you so much for sticking with me through this one. If this video opened your eyes, do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button and give it a like. It really helps the channel grow. And for the comments, I have one last question for you. What's the single biggest, most obvious sign you've ever seen that told you a spot was completely and totally overfished? I can't wait to read your stories.